Sup, guys? Sode back with you for Thursday, April 3rd. We're off to an okay start in April. Slight loss to start the month, even though I don't think I should have lost on the first. I don't want to rehash that, but you can go watch my video yesterday where I rehashed it. Did have a winning day yesterday on my birthday, 6-3, and it probably should have been better than that. I feel like there was a possibility of winning every single one of those. My MLB totals, I had a total frenzy yesterday with mostly unders, and I think all of the totals but one hit. So I was just smashing them all, man. I kind of rehashed it in my evening video last night, but easy win to kick off the day on the under in the Texas-Cincinnati game. 1-0 game there. Then the Royals-Brewers was way under to end the ninth inning at least. It went into extra innings, though, with a 1-1 tie. And you know what happens in extra innings, man. Unders die in extra innings with a stupid runner on second rule. I don't want to have to rehash that again, how much I hate that rule. But I was like, this is going to lead to 4 additional runs. It only led to 3 additional runs. Each team scored once. It went to another inning. Brewers blew it, I think, in the bottom of the 10th, maybe. They stranded multiple runners. I think they had the bases loaded with less than 2 outs and couldn't score. But they finally did score in the bottom of the 11th, I believe, and won the game 3-2. So that one still went under. Houston, San Francisco was the only one that did not stay under for me, as Framber Valdez got kind of knocked around early, and that game still only went over by 1 run. I think it landed 9. So that was still pretty close. If Valdez didn't have a bad start to that game, I think that would have been an under as well. That would have hit. And then we had another under, I think, in the Padres game. Was it Padres? I think it was. That one went under as well, with Dylan Cease, I think, pitched in that game. He was basically the guy that won that game. The other side of it wasn't as good with, it was against Cleveland. That's right. Lively, I think, didn't do that well in the game. Ben Lively, is that his name? He got hit around a little bit early, but the Padres pitching definitely came through in that one. That was good. And then the other MLB loss was the one side that I had on the Dodgers. The Dodgers put themselves in a 5-0 hole against the Braves, which is not what I expected. I gave out the numbers on the show, how bad Bryce Elder was last year, how bad his numbers were against the Dodgers. He didn't do that badly, I don't think, and it was a 5-0 Braves lead. Dodgers did what they do, though, and they got right back into the game, and they almost made it a possibility of covering that number, but they won by 1. So the Dodgers still actually won the game, but didn't cover the 1.5 run line. Maybe I should have laid the extra juice for the -1 just to get the push, so it wouldn't have been a loss, but it was pretty expensive, so I didn't do it. Very unfortunate. The one other thing you got to be aware of when you're playing the run line, if you're laying -1.5 on the home team, is that the home team, if they're ahead going into the bottom of the 9th inning, of course, they're not going to bat against. They got one fewer inning to hit. So if they're up by 1 run at that point, you don't get the chance to pad the lead anymore at that point. I don't think that's what happened in that game. I think it was a walk-off Dodgers win in the 9th, but I could be wrong about that. But whatever the case was, I wish they just hit a home run or something and gotten it back for me. But that one was a loss, so that sucked. I apologize for that. I thought the pitching matchup was a mismatch there. And then we had NBA. I think I should have won both games. The Miami Heat was an easy win over my Boston Celtics. I told you, I think I'm pretty decent at reading the Boston Celtics, and that was no sweat. I mean, the Heat won outright by double digits. I think they were winning by double digits the whole game. Very easy win on the Miami Heat there. Unfortunately for the Celtics, but I mean, they're not going to show up in every single game. So that was a spot to go against them in the return home. And then the Dallas Mavericks, I think they should have gotten there. I think they were winning by 12, 13 points with like 10 minutes left, and they wound up not covering. They had to hold on for the win. I think Anthony Davis scored a game winner at the end to break a tied game or something ridiculous, with the fact that they were winning by double digits in the 4th quarter, and they completely imploded and blew that lead. I think Dallas should have been able to cover there, so they won and didn't cover. The line was down to 3.5 later in the day as well, so I actually did lay the 3.5 in that one instead of the 4.5 or whatever it was, because I hadn't played it yet. So I was just watching the market a little bit on that one, but that was either way, it wound up losing. I don't think it should have lost regardless of which number you got on that, but it did. And then we had NHL was a winner with the Seattle Kraken. I think they won 4-0 probably. An easy win on the Kraken in a nice situational spot as I try to turn hockey around after a bad slide in hockey. Most of the season have been pretty good in hockey, but recently been cold as ice, let's say. So let's move on to today, man. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about here. The only sport that I'm not playing anything in is college basketball. We'll start with the NIT just because it is at the top here. The NIT Championship is tonight, which is at Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, which is Butler Stadium. And as I keep mentioning, it is also that arena that Hoosiers was filmed in, the championship game in Hoosiers, which I just watched recently because I'd forgotten that was the case. So kind of that weird airplane hangar-ish venue there. But these teams are going to be used to the venue now because they both played in the venue already. So that could mean that the over is a little bit sneaky in this game. Even though the public looks like they like the over, 93% of tickets, only 74% of the cash. I'm not really opposed to the over in this game. Both teams kind of like to speed the game up a little bit, even though UC Irvine does play good defense. UC Irvine is really good on the interior defense and not quite as good at defending the three. Chattanooga does take a lot of threes, and they're pretty good at hitting them. So I could see this game going over. And now, even though these teams are playing, a second game in 3 days or whatever, they are used to the sight lines now because they just played in this venue. So to me, that seems like it would be a little bit more conducive to an over as well. That plus the defense is being a little bit tired because they played the other day. And and like I said, both teams kind of like to run, I'm pretty sure, especially Irvine. So that may be the case. Irvine is one of those weird profile. They're one of those teams that profiles kind of strange. They're kind of like St. John's, where they have a really good defensive efficiency number on KenPom, but they play fast. So a fast team that actually plays better defense than offense, which is kind of strange. Irvine on the side are up from 3 to 3.5 with juice, but they got 65% of the tickets, only 61% of the cash. So they seem to be public. I think maybe because people kind of recognize their name a little bit more just because they played UC San Diego, and UC San Diego kind of had some hype around them. Chattanooga kind of flying under the radar. The issue that I would have with Chattanooga, though, is that they played a bunch of games on the road here. Irvine played every game in this tournament at home until these games here. Chattanooga has been away from home in every game except the one against Dayton, I guess, kind of going back and forth all over the place. Although at least for Chattanooga, they've kind of stayed in the same area of the country, whereas Irvine had to come in from the Pacific Coast, which is why I didn't like them. I think they should have lost to North Texas, to be honest, but they got through that game. But UC Irvine looking pretty ugly against North Texas, whereas Chattanooga looked a little bit better in their win over Loyola Chicago. Actually, to me, that would seem like the public would be off of UC Irvine a little bit, but it seems like that's not the case there. So I have a lot of trouble with figuring out this game, man. So obviously I'm not going to play it. The market read, I would say, slightly is indicating I'm taking the points with Chattanooga. I don't know if I would do that or not, but I think the matchup as far as UC Irvine, the way that they play defense, they don't defend the three as well. That could be a little bit of an advantage for Chattanooga. But I think Chattanooga is the worst of the two defensive teams. So we will see what happens in that game. And then we do have the college basketball crown continuing at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. This is a really tricky tournament. I haven't tried to play any of these games in the tournament. I don't even know if I will. It's just really hard to gauge these teams. I mean, both of these games have lines that are way out of whack from where KenPom has them. KenPom has both these numbers way shorter, but it's because the personnel has changed a lot. We got Central Florida and Cincinnati. Cincinnati up from 5.5 to 6. 89% of tickets, 90% of the cash, 6 with juice, actually. So the money appears to be coming in on Cincinnati, even though they are a little bit public here as well. I had mentioned I didn't like Central Florida in the previous game as they're having to go out to Las Vegas here and face Oregon State, who had just played in Las Vegas in the WCC tournament. Oregon State covered that game. I thought the number was too big on Central Florida. Again, sometimes these numbers I think are just getting over-adjusted based on the personnel. So KenPom's numbers might still mean something in that even though he's looking at kind of the personnel that they had throughout the season and the personnel might be different now, you might be seeing the lines being a little bit overreactive to this. So it is possible this number is just too high on Cincinnati. And Cincinnati is a defensive team that likes to play slow. So that is a little bit less conducive to Cincinnati covering a large number as well. The other interesting thing about this, though, is that Cincinnati is in UCF's conference. So they did play once this year, and Cincinnati actually went to UCF and won that game. UCF was a 3.5-point favorite in that game. So now the line is really adjusted. It's really shifted because that would kind of indicate that on a neutral, this line should be like almost closer to a pick 'em. Maybe a Cincinnati like a slight favorite, and now we're looking at them being a 6-point favorite. I think because some UCF players probably aren't there. I don't think this was really that misleading of a game, although Cincinnati had a 58.5% field goal percentage, which was a little bit high, I guess. So maybe that was a little bit misleading. UCF actually completely out-rebounded them. So if you force me to lean, I would lean to taking the points with Central Florida, but I'm not going to do it. We see all the totals going up again in these games too, by the way, in the crown games here. As the thought is basically just, I think that these teams just have still like rested offenses, even though these teams have played one game in the tournament already. Cincinnati, by the way, I think had a much easier win in the tournament against, who did they beat? DePaul, I think. Yeah, so not really a whole lot to gather from that. USC and Villanova. USC had an easy win over Tulane. They smoked Tulane in the previous game. Villanova beat Colorado. Both teams actually won by over 20 points. Villanova, kind of weird to see them winning by margin. Villanova up from 1.5 to 5.5 with 81% of the cash coming in on them. 5.5 with juice and 53% of tickets on USC. I do think USC has lost some of their guys here, so Ken Baum does have this number being way lower as well. I think maybe in this case the line is overreacting as well because Villanova, they play a slow style, man. Even though I know they don't really actually play good defense this season, they're more of an offensive team despite the fact they play slow, but that slow pace might make it a little bit more difficult to cover a 5.5 number here, even though we do see these totals aren't particularly low here, but I don't know, man. I mean, I think it might make sense to just grab the points in both these games, especially as both games are kind of unpredictable. So, and both favorites are slow-paced teams, and Cincinnati does like to play defense. Villanova, yeah, I mean, they still play a slow style, so very tough to gauge. I'm not going to play any of these games. I think I'm just talking about these games for too long. Not very interesting, really. I think the Crown tournament should just go away. I think it's just stupid. All right. My Boston Bruins are at Montreal, and I know Montreal's coming off back-to-back big wins over Florida, but Montreal's the only team with anything to play for here. As you can see, I do have the standings up. Montreal is sitting in the last wild card spot right now, but they're actually tied with the Rangers. They just have the tiebreaker right now. So Montreal actually has a lot to play for here, trying to get into the playoffs. My Boston Bruins are literally in last place in the East now and have lost 9 games in a row or something. They got nothing left. Montreal up from minus 189 to minus 201. 57% of tickets, 95% of the cash coming in on them. So the money coming in on the Canadians as well. I mean, I don't know what to say about this. Montreal, like I said, they're the only team that has anything to play for here, even though they could be in a letdown spot off of that Florida win, 2 Florida wins, but I don't know, man. I mean, you could argue the line is just too high on Montreal as well. It's definitely not a cheap price, but again, there's no way that I would try to play the Bruins with Montreal being the only motivated team there. Tampa is at Ottawa. Tampa laying a short price here, up from minus 120 to minus 133. I don't see the percentages yet. Ottawa does have something to play for as well, as they're trying to maintain their wild card spot. Although they're sitting decently with a 5-point padding. They don't really have the opportunity to move up because I think they're in the Atlantic, so they're 8 points behind Florida. So they're almost locked into the number 1 wild card spot at this point, although there could be some shifting. So Ottawa might still have a little bit more motivation for that reason. Tampa was just in New York and beat the Islanders, and now they have to go up to Ottawa, so it is a second straight road game for them. Ottawa coming off an ugly loss to Buffalo and staying at home, and with probably slightly more motivation because Tampa is obviously going to make the playoffs, so they could kind of change their seeding a little bit, but I think the motivation is more on Ottawa's side to make sure that they get into the playoffs at all, and they're in the better situational spot. So I would lean to Ottawa, getting them as a home underdog there. Next up, I'm going to play a home underdog in the Columbus Blue Jackets, the BJs. I'm going to fade Colorado. Colorado's down from minus 160 to minus 141, so the line has moved down on Colorado. I don't know if that's just because of a goaltender change, though, or because Colorado's on the back-to-back. I'm a little bit worried that Columbus looks public right now with 70% of tickets, only 51% of the cash, so they look like a very dreaded public home underdog, but I think the situation lines up very nicely for Columbus here. Colorado's on a back-to-back. They had to go into a shootout last night, although you could argue that was kind of embarrassing because they had to go to a shootout against Chicago, but they had to put in, extra time. It looks like probably Blackwood will be in net this time after Wedgwood played each of the last two, so they will probably have their better goalie who is rested here, so that is a slight advantage to Colorado, I guess. But Colorado coming off 2 straight shootouts. They're playing a back-to-back. They're playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities. They got St. Louis, Vegas up next. They have big Western Conference matchups coming up next. I think Columbus just needs this game more, man. I mean, if you look at the standings, Colorado, where are they at here? Where's Western Conference? Colorado is almost locked into this 3 spot in the Central Division, man, as they're 6 points back of Dallas. And as far as the wild card, they're 7 points ahead of Minnesota. So Colorado is almost guaranteed to be in that spot that they're in right now. They don't have as much to play for. And they're going to be the more tired team because they're on the back-to-back, coming off 2 straight shootouts. They got a bigger game up next against St. Louis, in my opinion, because that's one of those determining games for wild card positioning and playoff positioning. I don't think they care as much about an Eastern Conference game, whereas for Columbus, they got to win, man. They're like 2 points out of the race right now. I know they're coming off a win over Nashville where they scored eight goals, which might have you a little bit cocky, but I don't think you're gonna be that cocky when you're fighting to make the playoffs, man. You got the Colorado Avalanche coming into your house. Colorado, pretty good team, so I think Columbus is gonna have to be the more motivated team here. You're getting them as a home underdog here, so I like it. They have the rest advantage as well. You'll probably get Elvis Merzlikins back in net here, as he has only played 1 game out of the last couple, so he's probably going to be back in net. He is their better goalie, for what that's worth. Not that their goalies are any good, but Columbus, like I said, they're fighting to get into the playoffs, man. They're only 2 points out of the last wild card spot, so they need the game more. And when you have a team that is going to be motivated like that and they're an underdog, that is the way that you want to look. Home underdog even as well. So that's where we're going to go there. I'm going to skip some of these other games. They're just kind of ugly. Next game up is another game that I'm on. Oh, sorry, not Columbus. Utah. I know I play on Utah a lot, for better or for worse. I've played on Columbus a decent amount too this year, but another home underdog here. I like the spot for Utah for somewhat similar reasons. The Kings are up from -110 to -127, but I don't like this, man. I don't like the spot that the Kings are in. I think they're in a sandwich spot. They're coming off beating Winnipeg, man. Winnipeg has the best record in hockey still. Huge win for Winnipeg. And now they have this one single game where they have to go up into elevation and face Utah. Then they come back and face Edmonton on Saturday in 2 days, which is a much bigger game as well. Huge game against Edmonton. So playing this game between 2 of the best teams in the Western Conference, I don't think it's a good spot for them. As far as Utah is concerned, I think they're in the better spot here. Utah, they return home and they beat Calgary, I believe, in their last game. Yeah, so that was a return home spot, which usually is not a good spot because when you return home, obviously, as I always say, you get a little bit distracted. You have to return to home life, etc. But they won the game anyway. And usually when you do bad, you're really focused in the next game. But I think even though they won that game against Calgary, I think they're still going to be focused here, man. I mean, you have a pretty good team like the LA Kings coming into your place. I know Utah's just being completely insane, and they played Vemelka in every game going all the way back to February 23rd. So he's been in net every single game. Like, what the fuck is Utah doing? Not giving Vemelka rest? I have no idea. I don't know if he's going to play tonight or not. I don't really think it matters as far as the handicap is concerned. I mean, it's just ridiculous that they're the only team that seems to be doing this, and it's almost old school in a way, man. It's like, yeah, we're just going to have our goalie go out there and grind every single game. I mean, you got to respect it, I guess. But yeah, as far as Utah is concerned, the hockey club, as far as they're concerned, they're sitting, they are 9 spots out of the wild card, so they're probably thinking they're probably about close to being on the verge of elimination. Not quite there yet, though, but I think they have more motivation just because this is kind of like a last gasp. They're still not eliminated yet. They're at home against a good team. The LA Kings, yeah, I mean, it's possible they fall into this 3rd spot instead of the 2nd spot in the Pacific, but I don't think it matters that much between those 2 spots. I mean, yeah, they're going to have a different opponent depending on which one of those spots they get, but does that really matter that much? They're not going to fall into the wild card. I mean, pretty unlikely, I guess. I mean, they're 4 points up right now over both of those teams. So I think the spot is just way better for Utah, though. They're the more motivated team, in my opinion, just because they're in total desperation mode at this point, and LA is in a sandwich spot. So I will take Utah in that game as well. No, I'm not an Angels fan, Andrew. I don't like any of the LA area teams, really. I really hate the LA teams. I'm neutral on the Angels, although I will say I've been to an Angels game in their stadium, and I liked it. The Angels, they do this thing where because they don't really sell out every one of their games. The game that I went to was several years ago at this point. It was against the Twins. So it wasn't a game that I think was going to be that heavily attended. But if you go to the Angels, they don't sell out all their games. You can get cheap tickets. You can get half-price tickets in the hour before the game starts. So that's what I did. And I wound up with like a $30-something ticket, and I was like 5 rows back on the first baseline, a little bit past first base. So it was a pretty good seat. And for some reason, I was in a section that was like all Minnesota fans. So everybody around me was rooting for Minnesota, even though we were in Anaheim, just in that like section there. So I kind of started rooting for them too, just because why the hell not, really? And it wound up being a crazy game. It went into extra innings, which probably meant it ended really late on the East Coast, but at least I was on the West Coast at that point. But it was an extra innings game. Minnesota did win that game. And then I wound up getting a ride back to my hotel from a random woman. Well, not totally random because she was sitting next to me, but like I was going to like get a cab or something back to my hotel. And she was like, you don't want to like do that. You don't want to go through this like bad area here. Like I'll just give you a ride. I'm like, all right. Kind of strange. Am I really that non-threatening that this like random like mother would just be like, yeah, I'll drive you back. I'm like, what? I don't know, man. But probably I had more to be afraid of than she did, really. She kind of scared me, to be honest. But yeah, that was a little bit of a sidetrack there. Another Toad story for you there. All right, that's going to do it for, hockey. Winnipeg and Vegas is a big game as well. Want to try to get through these games, man. Vegas down from minus 130 to minus 121, but they have 92% of the cash on them. 50% of tickets evenly split. So the cash looks like it's coming in on Vegas, even though the line has dropped on Vegas. I probably don't disagree with the Vegas side here. I mean, Winnipeg, they're sitting pretty well right now. If you look at the standings, did I lose the standings? I think I did. But Winnipeg, I mean, they have the top record in hockey right now, man. I know they're coming off a loss to the Kings. They got to play 2 straight road games here, but I think Vegas probably is going to want the game a little bit more. I mean, they're jockeying for positioning, I think, a little bit more than Winnipeg is right now as far as the playoffs are concerned. Vegas is also coming off a real tough loss to Edmonton, which broke a long win streak. So a lot of times when you have a big game and it breaks a win streak like that for you, that's not great. But then again, that was a return home spot for Vegas, and a lot of times when you lose that game, you do play better in the next game. And it's not like they're going to overlook basically the best team in hockey coming into their place. So I might slightly agree with the Vegas side there, but there's no way I'm going to try to get involved in that. NBA, we got a short card and a lot of kind of uninteresting NBA games here as we come down the stretch in the NBA. A lot of big favorites against teams that are just out of it. We got teams that are out of it playing each other. None of these games interest me that much, except that I am going to play. I'll talk about both of these TNT games or whatever. Yeah, Anaheim is a shithole, yeah. The area that I was in was near like the convention center because I was at SIGGRAPH, which is a huge computer graphics conference. That was a fun time, actually. But that area is kind of like isolated. It's kind of like across the street from Disney, and it's in this like convention like complex area almost, where it's basically just like the convention center, hotels, etc. There was a crazy NVIDIA party at that thing, man, with like ice luges and I'm trying to remember who the DJ was. There was some well-known DJ DJing it too. I can't remember which one it was though. I think it was I want to say it was Deadmau5. Is that right? I can't even remember at this point. I should remember. I'm not really I'm not up on the DJs. I'm not in the DJ scene. I think it might have been him though. But yeah, it is a shithole. All right, NBA. I am going to be on the Memphis Grizzlies here, -4. I mean, you kind of know the deal, man. I played the Heat last night, and now I'm going right against them because I think they were in a good spot to play them last night, and now I think they're not in a good spot. Grizzlies down from 5.5 to 4. I don't really know why that's the case because I'm pretty sure John Morant is playing. He's been back for a little bit now, and he's playing, so the injury report doesn't look that crazy on the Grizzlies side. The Heat might be getting some guys back like Duncan Robinson and Jovic and whatever. But if they have to work those guys back into the lineup, I still think that's not that great for the Heat. So I'm going to play this either way. Either the Heat aren't getting those guys back or they are, and they'll have to kind of readjust their chemistry a little bit. I just think the spot dictates this play. Grizzlies have 66% of the tickets, but 91% of the cash. Not surprising the public is going to play on Memphis as well because they have the better record, but I like the spot a lot better for Memphis. I mean, they're going out on the road after having a really bad homestand. We're talking about a Memphis team that's fighting to get into the playoffs to avoid the play-in games, which is, I think, a pretty big motivator. But they've lost 4 games in a row. But look who they lost to. They lost at Oklahoma City, came back home in a return home spot, which is never easy. And they played pretty competitively, but lost to the Lakers. Then they lost to Boston and then Golden State. So, I mean, those 4 teams, those are some of the best teams in the NBA right now, man. So I'm not going to knock Memphis for losing those games. Now they get to get out of there and go on the road, and I think this is a positive spot for them, man. When things are not working for you at home, one of the best things for you is to just forget about that. Go on the road, forget about what's going on there. Go on the road, focus on basketball, and they're actually going to step down in class for this game, playing a Miami team. It's the weakest team that they've played since this Utah game, and they won that Utah game pretty easily. Miami, obviously, way better than Utah, but still, I think this is a step down in class for Memphis here, so I like that as well. I think the spot sets up nicely, and like I said, Memphis, they're right there in the thick of it, man. There's a big pile of teams in the West that are all between the 5th, 6th spot all the way down through the play-in, and they're all separated by very few games. Memphis, I think, is locked into a tie right now with a couple of those teams, so they would definitely like to avoid the play-in, in my opinion, because you don't want to have to play in that small tournament just to get into the playoffs. You want to get one of those top 6 seeds, man, so you don't have to worry about those play-in games, which is basically if you lose 2 games, you're out. You don't want to be in there. So Memphis does have a lot of motivation, in my opinion. And on top of that, after having lost at home, that's going to be extra motivation as well. Being on a loss streak like that. Miami, they're on a huge win streak. So we have 2 trains going in opposite directions, and I'm going to jump right in the middle of it. I'm going to jump in front of 2 oncoming trains here because you got Miami, who's won 6 games in a row and covered, I think, even more than that in a row. And you got Memphis having lost 4 games in a row. But I just told you, Memphis lost to all good teams there. People are going to look at this and think, oh, Memphis lost to Boston. Memphis lost to Golden State, and Miami just beat Golden State and Boston. So you're giving me points with Miami at home? I think it almost looks too easy to take Miami getting the points here, especially after what we saw last night, but not so fast, man. Miami's playing on a back-to-back. They're having to come back home after they're just in the Northeast. I mean, it's not that much travel, but still, they've been away for a little while. They're returning home, so they're returning home against a team that's starting a road trip. Not a good spot, in my opinion, for Miami here. And I think it's a letdown spot because they just went into Boston, and Boston has had their number recently, man. Miami had only won 1 of the last, 10, 11 games or something against the Celtics. Miami went in there, got it done as a huge underdog, 11-point underdog, big win. They won the game wire to wire. I was on Miami because I said it was a bad spot for Boston. The Celtics were returning home from a long road trip where they swept the road trip and won a bunch of games on the Pacific Coast and whatever. So that was not a good spot for the Celtics. Miami, yes, I know they are still playing for playoff positioning, but so is Memphis. And Miami, again, I think they have less desperation here, although I know we're playing a desperate team that's laying points on the road, which is a little bit dangerous because the team just needs to win. They don't need to cover, so the pressure might be on, but I just think the situation lines up very nicely for this. And Miami, in that win streak, I mean, they did beat some pretty bad teams in there too. Charlotte, Philadelphia, Washington. So Memphis, those 4 straight losses were all to good teams, whereas Miami, more than half of these games were against pretty bad teams. Even Atlanta, I don't think Atlanta's very good, even though they covered against me last night. Atlanta, bad defensive team. They're not very good. So that's what we have going on there. I'm going to take Memphis. I'm going to lay the points with Memphis in that one. I don't know if the line's going to maybe move around a little bit there, but that is the play. And then we do have Golden State and the Lakers. The battle of the Battle of California is the last game up there on the night there and on TNT. TNT doubleheader, actually. That Memphis-Miami game is first, then Golden State and LA. Golden State coming off beating Memphis, just like I said. But now they're traveling from Memphis all the way back out to the Pacific Coast. So they're having to return back to the Pacific Coast to basically finish this road trip before they actually return home tomorrow against Denver. I don't think the spot is that great for Golden State, to be honest here. Having all these games on the road, they've had days off in between some of these games, so they've been all over the place. And now they're returning to the Pacific Coast shifting time zones within the last couple of days, even though they are still technically on the road trip. I think they might be getting a little bit tired. I don't know, man. I mean, Golden State does need the game more, though, because they're more in that, like, dogfight, trying to like make sure that they avoid the play-in, and they're trying to get one of those seeds in the Western Conference. Was the Lakers are a little bit higher up. They're a little bit better off as far as the playoff positioning is concerned. The Lakers just returned home in their last game, though, so they already had that return home spot, and they won anyway against a pretty good Houston team. So now they're staying at home, and they have extra days off. So I actually think the Lakers, it sets up better for the Lakers here, but the money is coming in against the Lakers. It's down from 3 to 1.5 with 52% of tickets on the Lakers, 67% of the cash coming in on the Warriors. So the market read looks pretty strong on the Warriors. I don't really see why as far as the situation is concerned, so I'm going to stay away. And I don't know if there's anything like injury-wise going on in this game. It looks like LeBron is a game-time decision, but I mean, what else is new? I think I expect him to play in a TNT game against Golden State. We'll see. And then I will say Minnesota's not in the greatest spot either, as they just had that big win for me 2 nights ago in elevation in Denver. Huge win over Denver in double overtime. And now they have to come down all the way to the East Coast and face Brooklyn, who's basically done for the season. But I don't like that. And Brooklyn's been playing competitively, at least, although they are returning home. They just beat Dallas. Not a bad win there for them on the road against Dallas, who is getting some of their players back. So I would take the points with the Nets or pass in that game. T-Wolves up from 12 to 13 with juice. They're definitely going to be public. 79% of tickets, 91% of the cash. They might be getting those suspended players back as well. But it would be taking the points with the Nets or pass in that game. And then we have a nice Thursday baseball card here, which it's interesting because it's getaway day for a couple of these teams, which means that the teams are playing these earlier kind of afternoon games, which are the last games of those particular series before the teams travel potentially or go somewhere else and start a new series, whereas we actually have 2 series that are starting anew, actually tonight, I believe. And I will be on one of those games. I'm on 2 totals here. I had mostly MLB totals yesterday, and it did well for me. My totals were 4-1 yesterday. I'm going right back to the totals here, man. Boston, my Red Sox, just because I always talk about the Boston teams, they're still at Baltimore. They've split the series so far 1-1, so this is the rubber match. Baltimore up from -109 to -110, though. 54% of the tickets, 90% of the cash coming in on Baltimore, so it looks like the money is coming in on Baltimore. I don't really disagree with it, even though I don't like Charlie Morton. The Red Sox aren't as familiar with him, even though he's been around for forever. I looked up his numbers. His numbers are actually decent against the Red Sox hitters. And Tanner Houck, even though I know he was an all-star, he's been awful since the all-star game last year, really. I don't think he's as good as he looked in the first half of the year last year. I'm not sold on Houck. And his numbers against Baltimore are pretty mediocre, so I do kind of agree with where the money is there, looking towards the Baltimore Orioles in that game. One of the games I'm going to be on, I'm actually going to play an over for the first time this year, and it's over what looks like a big total of 9.5 in Colorado, Philly. I like this, though, and again, when you see totals that look too low, you want to, I mean, the odds makers are telling you something, man. Totals that are really low, you kind of want to look to go under because the odds makers are telling you we think this is going to be a pretty low-scoring game. When the totals are high, you kind of want to look to go over, even though it seems more difficult to go over. And I think this is a pretty nice game to go with an over here, mostly because of the starting pitching match. But Colorado hasn't scored in this series. They lost 6-1 and 5-1. But look who they faced, man. They faced Zach Wheeler yesterday, and then I forget who started for Philadelphia in the other game. Who started for them? Christopher Sanchez. He's an okay starter as well. So this is a big step down in class to Taijuan Walker here for Philadelphia. So, I mean, Zach Wheeler is basically the ace of Philadelphia's staff, and that's who pitched yesterday. So even though Colorado's offense isn't that good, I think we're going to get more runs out of Colorado in this game than we have in the other 2 games. I would wager to say that Colorado's going to score more in this game than they did in the previous 2 games in the series combined, because they only scored 2 runs in the entire series so far. So it looks like this series has been lower scoring, but I don't know if I really think so, man. I mean, Colorado still has some decent hitters. Philadelphia, we know they're a pretty solid team. They got a pretty solid lineup with Philadelphia there. And I think the pitching is just not good here. We got Senzatella going for Colorado. He's got 1 game this year, and he has a 0 ERA, man. So that must mean he's pitching pretty well, right? No, not really. He had a 2.54 whip in that game, so that means he completely escaped in that game. Look at how bad his numbers were in that game. I don't know how he gave up no runs. I mean, Tampa's offense they just suck. He only went 4 1/3 in that game, and he had 2 walks, no strikeouts, and 9 hits allowed. So he put 11 men on base in 4 1/3. Somehow none of them scored, which means he was just like skating on thin ice the entire time, and it somehow didn't fall through. And having no strikeouts and 2 walks is another red flag. This guy's not fooling anyone. That start was actually horrific. And then if you look at his stats against the Phillies hitters, it doesn't get any better, as he's got 7 walks and 4 strikeouts against them, so more walks and strikeouts again there as well. Philadelphia has rocked him in 58 at-bats historically. 20 for 58 are Philadelphia's hitters off him for a 345 batting average. We have that, less than 1 strikeout to walk ratio, like I said, and a 995 OPS, so almost 1,000. So Senzatella, not a good pitcher, hasn't been good against Philadelphia. And then on the other hand, Taijuan Walker hasn't pitched yet this year, so he could maybe have a little bit of nerves on him. And he's a guy that does have decent stuff, but it really just hasn't come through, man. And last year he was horrific for Philadelphia with a 7.1 ERA and 1.72 whip. In a decent amount of starts, 15 starts. He was really falling apart. The year before that, he's been bad since he's been on the Phillies, man. Even the previous year, 4.38 ERA and 1.31 whip. That's not very good. He's been better throughout his career, but those last 2 years with Philadelphia, he's been pretty bad. He has struggled pretty mightily, and against Colorado, it doesn't get better. In 35 at-bats, worth 6.1 strikeout walk ratio is okay, but 400 batting average allowed him, 1,019 OPS. I don't trust either of these starters at all. So even though the bullpens didn't get that much work yesterday, I think we're looking at the makings of an over here, man. It's an afternoon game where I think, I don't know what's going to happen with the bullpen usage here. I don't know if these afternoon getaway games tend to be more overs or unders. I'm not even really sure, but the pitching matchup, I think, looks conducive to an over here. Both games have kind of misleadingly gone under in the series so far. So I think it's a perfect storm for an over in that one. And then the other game we're going to be on looks like a game you'd probably want to go with an over, but I'm going to fade that sentiment and go with an under in Cincinnati and Milwaukee, which is a game to start a series here at night. I know we have Arizona, New York. I mean, Merrill Kelly, Carlos Carrasco on New York now. Carrasco's, I'll mention that game briefly. Carrasco, I don't think is a very good pitcher. He's old now. He surprised everybody with the Mets last year, I think, having a pretty good season. He actually was able to command his pitches, even though he doesn't really have velocity. Merrill Kelly, the much younger, better pitcher. Both pitchers in that game actually have decent stats against the opposing lineups, I'm pretty sure. So maybe a lean to the under in that game. It's a high total of 9.5, which kind of is indicating the odds makers think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Maybe they don't trust Carrasco. I don't know, but the pitchers do have decent numbers against the opposing hitters, I think. So we'll leave that game alone. Minnesota is returning home from a road trip they were on to start the season, by the way, so it is a road trip return. Technically, Houston's starting a road trip after not playing that well at home. So situationally, the spot looks a little bit better for Houston. Hunter Brown doesn't have good numbers against Minnesota, though, and Joe Ryan actually doesn't have good numbers against Houston either. So the pitchers are kind of a wash there as far as both pitchers are pretty good, but not against these particular opponents. So I'm going to leave that one alone, too. The total, 7.5 in that one. Maybe a little bit low based on what these pitchers have done against those opposing hitters, which isn't that great. But Cincinnati, Milwaukee, they're starting a game here, starting a new series here. And I know Milwaukee went into extra innings yesterday, but they really didn't use that many relievers. Neither team used many of their relief pitchers yesterday. So I think the bullpens are in okay shape here, even though I don't know if I totally trust these bullpens. But I think the starting pitching matchup is good for an under here. Looking at the market, by the way, the over looks like it's getting traction in the Colorado Philly game. It's up from 9 juice to the under to 9.5 juice to the over, with 64% of the tickets and 97% of the cash on the over. So a lot of movement on the over, and I do agree with that one. It's better to get over 9. We definitely missed out on that. 9 being a key number in baseball, but we'll have to see, I guess. I don't know if we'll be able to find a 9 out there. You could pay a little bit extra to go over the 9. Again, we will see. And then the total in this game, what am I looking at? Where is the game? Yeah, Lodolo and Cortez here. Oh, they're both the National League games. I'm on both National League games today. 68% of the tickets are on the over. People thinking this is going to be an over. 96% of the cash coming in on the under. Again, I agree with the under here. We got two lefties, which can kind of throw hitters off a little bit as well with that pitching angle. Nick Lodolo's a good pitcher, man, and he's a beast on the mound at 6'6". He's been good, and I think he just kind of flies under the radar. He had a decent start to the season. 2 runs in 6 innings against the Giants, even though he only had 1 strikeout. He's definitely a better strikeout pitcher than that, though. If you look at his history, his strikeout numbers are good historically. He's a good strikeout pitcher. And against Milwaukee, 24 at-bats worth, they only hit 167 off him with a 593 OPS. So Lodolo has done well against the Brewers, and they actually haven't seen him that much, even though he is in their division. He's still a pretty new pitcher, even though he's 27. He's been in the league for a couple of years now. And he's impressed me, to be honest. I think he's been pretty good. And then you got Nestor Cortez, who has a 36 ERA and 5.5 whip. Who is going to want anything to do with this guy? As he got torpedo batted against his former team, the Yankees, here, allowing 8 runs in 2 innings on 6 hits and 5 walks. That's not going to happen again, man. You know he's a much better pitcher than that. He's going to bounce back from that, man. When you have a horrible outing to start the season like that, he gave up 5 home runs. You know he's going to be extra focused after that. That was just a horrible sequence of events there. Horrible game. He pitched pretty well for the Yankees last year, and it's not an easy pitching environment, pitching in the American League East in Yankee Stadium. I think he's going to do a lot better here. And the Reds haven't seen a lot of him. Only 5 of their hitters have seen him. Only 16 at-bats worth, and he has a 188 batting average against them and 503 OPS. So he's done pretty well against the Reds. So I like the under in this game for all those reasons, even though he does have a 1-3 strikeout walk ratio there. I think the under makes sense. That's going to do it. So for today, we got the Blue Jackets in hockey plus 130, Utah Hockey Club plus 110, Memphis Grizzlies in NBA minus 4, and 2 MLB totals over in Colorado and Philadelphia. I think you probably have to go over 9.5. I don't know if you can find the 9 out there. Maybe pay a little bit more for the 9, and then under Reds Brewers 7.5. That's going to do it. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. If you missed last night's episode, go check it out. That's going to do it. Have a good one, everybody. Peace.